I still remember the exact moment my family shattered. It wasn't with a scream, but with a single cruel sentence from my father that finally made me realize I would never be enough for them. My name is Esperanza. I'm 32, a first-generation American, and for most of my life, I tried to shrink myself into a daughter my parents could finally love without conditions. That warm summer evening was meant to be a celebration of their 35 years together. Instead, it became the night I found my voice, when my father looked at me and said he wished I was never born. Something inside me finally broke open. I stood up from that table and said words that left the entire room frozen in shock. But to understand why that moment changed everything, I need to take you back to the beginning. My parents, Carlos and Lucia, arrived here with 2 suitcases and enormous dreams. They met working double shifts in an Arizona restaurant, saving every penny for what they called the real American dream, their future children's success to them that meant only 3 things: doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Anything else was a failure. By the time I was born, they had a stable life. My brother Gabriel was the golden child from the start. Excellence wasn't just encouraged in our house, it was the bare minimum. B's were treated like failures. Achievements were never celebrated, just acknowledged as what was expected. You got an O on your math test, good. Next time, study more for spelling. My mother would say, barely looking up. My earliest memories are of sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by workbooks, while other kids played outside. Gabriel seemed to thrive under this pressure. I just felt like my best was never, ever good enough. In 3rd grade, I won 1st place in the school science fair. My project even got featured in the local paper. I was so proud. When I showed my dad, he just glanced at it and said, "Science is good. You should focus on this instead of always drawing in your notebooks." That was their way. Every accomplishment was just a stepping stone to the next greater expectation. By middle school, I was my own harshest critic. I stayed up late studying, joined every academic club, and pushed myself to the point of exhaustion, trying to earn a shred of the approval that always seemed just out of reach. The first real crack appeared in high school. My art teacher, Miss Sullivan, saw something in me. She encouraged me to apply to this prestigious summer art program. When I got in with a scholarship, I was ecstatic. For the first time, I felt seen for something I genuinely loved. I brought the news to the dinner table. My father put down his fork. "Art, what good is art? This is a distraction. You will not go." I tried to reason with them. I said it looked great for college applications. But my mother just shook her head. "College is for medicine or law, not drawing pictures. Gabriel is already preparing for pre-med. Why must you always be different?" That night, I cried in my room, understanding for the first time that my happiness and their approval were on 2 completely different paths. I went to the program anyway. I lied and told them it was a general academic camp. It was the first time I'd ever deceived them, and the guilt was heavy. But those 6 weeks were the most formative of my life. When college applications came, the conflict came to a head. I applied to top schools for both pre-med and design. I got into the Rhode Island School of Design with a great scholarship. My parents had already cleared a space on the wall for my medical school diploma. The disappointment on their faces when I told them my decision is something I will never forget. "We did not come to this country for you to waste your potential," my father said, walking away from me. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. I left for college that fall with a stiff hug from my father and a reminder to at least graduate with honors, since you chose this path. I did excel, Dean's List every semester, design competitions, prestigious internships, but every call home was the same. "That's nice, but when will you apply to graduate school for something serious?" The years of conditional love left me with crippling anxiety. I carried this belief that if I wasn't perfect, I was nothing. The idea of just being enough felt impossible. After graduating summa cum laude, I turned down a safe job in Arizona for a risky position at a boutique design agency in New York. Their disappointment was predictable, but I was determined to build a life on my own terms. Those first years in New York were a blur of 60. hour weeks, and ramen dinners in my tiny Brooklyn apartment. I didn't tell them about the struggle. I also didn't tell them about the small victories, the clients who loved my work. They wouldn't have understood. Everything changed when I met Jennifer, a creative director who took me under her wing. She was everything I needed, accomplished, unapologetic, and supportive. The first time she praised my work without adding a critique, I nearly cried. She told me, "You have a unique perspective, Esperanza. Stop trying to make your work perfect and start making it authentic." She became the mentor I never had. She celebrated my wins without condition. She taught me that failure isn't fatal, it's just data. It was at one of her parties that I met David, a writer. Our connection was immediate. For the first time, I felt fully seen and accepted. He listened to my childhood stories with growing concern. "Esperanza," he said gently one night, "that's not high expectations. That's emotional abuse." I defended my parents at first, but with his support, I started therapy. I began to see our family dynamics for what they were. When David and I decided to move in together, my parents saw it as a personal failure. My mother cried about the shame. My father sent a long email detailing all their sacrifices and my disrespect. Despite the tension, my career was flourishing. At 27, I won a major industry award. It was a huge deal. Jennifer threw me a party. David was so proud. When I called my parents to share the news, their response was, "That's nice, but you know it's just drawing pictures." Gabriel just published his first medical research paper. That was the moment something broke in David. He couldn't understand why I kept seeking approval from people who couldn't give it. We had our first big fight. "Why do you keep going back for more hurt?" he asked, frustrated. "At some point, you have to protect yourself." The strain was too much. We eventually separated. It felt like another dream sacrificed for their expectations. The breakup sent me into a deep depression, but it also pushed me to commit to therapy. My therapist, Dr. Richardson, helped me see the pattern clearly. "The child should not have to earn the parent's love," she told me. "That's a fundamental reversal of how relationships should work." I started setting hard boundaries, limited calls, stopped sharing details about my career. I learned to say, "I'll consider that," instead of getting defensive. The distance helped me grow stronger, but the core wound was still there. Every interaction was exhausting. When the invitation for my parents' 35th anniversary party arrived, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. With my therapist's help, I decided to go, but on my terms. I booked a hotel. I limited my stay. I prepared. Walking into their house, the criticism started immediately. "Esperanza, you look tired. Have you lost weight? Are you eating?" The party was filled with relatives. My mother introduced my cousins, the pharmacist, the law student, the PhD candidate, with pride. Then she'd add, and Esperanza designs advertisements in New York. With noticeably less enthusiasm, dinner was the final act. The seating arrangement said it all. Gabriel and his pregnant wife near my father, me stuck between my heart of hearing uncle and a texting teenager. My father stood for a toast. He praised my mother. He praised Gabriel, our son, the doctor, soon to make us grandparents and continue our family legacy. I waited for some mention of me. It never came. I had been publicly erased. When my mother finally turned to me, it was with a dismissive, "Tell everyone about your job. Are you still with that small company, or have you found something more established?" I told them about my promotion, about the national award my team had just won. "That's nice," she said, "but is there opportunity for advancement? What's the next step toward a real career?" A real career, as if my entire professional life was a hobby. My father set down his fork. "Successful is a relative term, Esperanza. Your brother is saving lives. That is meaningful work." I tried to explain that our heart disease awareness campaign would save lives too. He just waved his hand. These artistic trends come and go. The conversation then turned to my personal life, my singleness, my age, my pickiness. They spoke about me as if I wasn't even there. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller in that chair. Then my father said it, the quiet part out loud. Sometimes I think we focus too much on Gabriel and not enough on correcting your path. He looked right at me, his voice tight with a lifetime of disappointment. Sometimes we wish you were never born, then we wouldn't have to see so much potential thrown away. The room went completely silent. You could hear a pin drop, my cousin gasped, my aunt put a hand over her mouth. And in that frozen moment, a strange calm settled over me. The disaster I had feared my whole life had finally happened, and I was still breathing. I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. My chair scraped loudly in the silence. When I spoke, my voice was steady and clear. Perfect, then you won't need me when you're old. The silence deepened. My father's face was shocked, then angry. My mother tried to backtrack. He was just joking. No, I said, still standing. He wasn't joking, and neither was I. To my absolute shock, Gabriel stood up next. Dad, what you said was completely out of line. My Aunt Teresa tried to calm things down, but the dam had broken. I walked out of that dining room, past the frozen faces of my relatives. I got in my car, drove 2 blocks, and pulled over, finally letting the tears come. 2 years of trying, 2 years of never being enough. But beneath the pain was relief. The pretense was over. That night, Gabriel came to my hotel. I should have said something years ago. He told me. We talked for hours, unraveling a lifetime of dynamics. He confessed that his perfect compliance had been its own prison. I returned to New York and began the real work of healing. I leaned on my chosen family, my friends, my mentor. I stopped apologizing for my success. When my father had a minor heart attack a few months later, the old me would have flown back immediately. The new me sent a card. It was a seismic shift. My mother called, furious, "What kind of daughter are you?" For the first time, I stated my truth without apology. He has excellent medical care. He doesn't need someone he wishes had never been born. I had finally found the courage to choose myself. The journey wasn't linear. There were setbacks, but I built a life rich with meaning. I found love with a man who understood my boundaries. My career reached new heights because I was finally creating from an authentic place, not a desperate need for approval. About 1.5 years after that dinner, I agreed to meet my parents at a neutral restaurant. It was awkward, but my father, struggling, managed to say the words. What I said was wrong. I should never have said we wished you were never born. It wasn't a full apology for a lifetime of hurt, but it was a start. A recognition. He even admitted, I may not understand your world, but I can see you have built something significant. And in that moment, I realized I no longer needed more from him. I had found my worth elsewhere. 3 years later, the relationship is civil, limited. It will never be the picture, perfect family I once craved, but it's honest. I learned that family isn't always who you're born to. It's a circle of love and acceptance you build. The table I gather around now is set with genuine affection, not conditions. My journey from that dining room to this place of peace taught me the most powerful lesson. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop trying to earn a love that should be freely given, and instead, build a life where you are loved for exactly who you are. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who diminished your choices, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you find your voice? If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, your worth isn't something you earn, it's your birthright, and sometimes the most powerful words you can ever say are simply, I deserve better. That meeting at the restaurant was a turning point, not because everything was fixed, but because the war inside me was finally over. I had made peace with the fact that my relationship with my parents would likely always be a quiet, distant shore. Something I could visit, but never build my home on. Back in New York, life didn't just move on, it expanded. The energy I had once spent agonizing over their approval, I now poured into my own world. My apartment, once just a place to sleep, became a real home, filled with art I loved, and the constant, warm chaos of good friends. Michael, my architect, understood this part of me in a way no one else had. He never pushed for a reconciliation I wasn't ready for. His own family had its complexities, and he saw my boundaries not as walls, but as the foundation I needed to stand on. We get to decide what our family looks like, he'd say, his hand resting gently on mine. Professionally, a new chapter began. The award had cemented my reputation, but now the work felt different. It was bolder. I started taking on projects that scared me, that spoke to my core. I led a campaign for mental health awareness in creative industries, using my own story of anxiety and therapy as a touchstone. It was terrifying to be that vulnerable publicly, but the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of messages poured in from other designers, writers, and artists who felt the same pressure, the same silent struggle. For the first time, my perceived flaw, my sensitivity, became my greatest professional strength. My mentoring of young designers like Lucia became a central part of my life. Seeing her finally stand up to her parents and enroll in design school felt like healing a part of my own past. I wasn't just giving her advice, I was whispering to the ghost of my younger self, telling her she was brave. Meanwhile, my relationship with Gabriel deepened into a real, adult friendship. Our weekly calls were no longer just updates on our parents, but about our lives. His challenges as a new father, my excitement over a new project. He confessed that watching me break free had given him the courage to start setting his own boundaries with our parents, pushing back on their expectations for his children. "It's like you gave us all permission to breathe, Esperanza," he told me one night. The holidays, once a source of dread, transformed. Instead of a tense flight to Arizona, Michael and I started hosting Friendsgiving, an orphan Christmas, in our apartment. The table was loud, messy, and filled with laughter. It was a chosen family, bound not by blood, but by mutual respect and joy. My mother would call on Christmas morning, her voice tinged with a sadness I could finally hear without guilt. I'd wish her a happy holiday, speak with my father briefly, and then hang up, able to fully return to the celebration in my own home, my heart intact. About 2 years after the restaurant meeting, my mother was diagnosed with early-stage arthritis. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was a reminder of their mortality. When she called to tell me, her voice was different. Softer, less sure. "Your father. He doesn't know how to help," she admitted, a rare moment of vulnerability. This time I didn't feel the panicked pull of obligation. Instead, I acted from a place of calm choice. I researched specialists in their area and emailed the information to Gabrielle. I called her once a week to check in, listening without trying to fix everything. I sent a care package with ergonomic kitchen tools. I was caring, but from a sustainable distance. I was the daughter I could be, not the daughter I was expected to be. On my 35th birthday, a small, heavy package arrived in the mail. It was from my parents. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the handmade silver photo frame I had given them for their anniversary years before, the one that had cost me a fortune and had been met with such dismissal. I held my breath, turning it over. It wasn't empty. Inside was a photograph of me at maybe 6 years old, sitting at that kitchen table, concentrating fiercely on a drawing. My tongue stuck out in focus. My father must have taken it. I'd never seen this picture before. And on the back, in my father's precise, unfamiliar handwriting, was a new inscription: "Our daughter, Esperanza, who built something significant." I sat on my floor and cried, not the painful, desperate sobs of my youth, but a quiet, releasing flow of tears. It wasn't the grand apology from my dreams. It was something perhaps more real, an acknowledgement. A peace offering. It was them in their own limited language trying to meet me on the shore I had built. I placed the frame on my bookshelf right in the center, not as a trophy of a battle won, but as a reminder of a complicated, painful, but enduring love. A testament to the fact that people can change, even if it's slowly, and even if it's not in the ways you first imagined. The story doesn't have a perfect Hollywood ending. My parents still don't fully get my life. My mother will still sometimes ask if I've thought about a more stable career path. My father's praise is still often wrapped in a qualifier, but the difference is, it doesn't land the same way anymore. The hook is gone. Their words are no longer the metric by which I measure my worth. I look at my life now, the man I love, the work that fulfills me, the deep bonds of my chosen family, and I feel a sense of wholeness I once thought was impossible. The little girl at that kitchen table, trying to earn love with perfect grades, has finally come home to herself. The journey taught me that healing isn't about the past disappearing. It's about building a present so full and so true that the past no longer holds the power to define you. Your story might be different. Your dinner table moment might still be ahead of you, or you might be in the thick of the painful middle. But if you take one thing from my story, let it be this: you are allowed to build your own table. You are allowed to choose who sits at it, and you are absolutely, unequivocally enough, just as you are. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. That photo frame still sits on my shelf. It's been 5 years now since that dinner. If you'd told me then where I'd be today, I'm not sure I would have believed you. The path to peace isn't a straight line, it's more like a river finding its way around ancient stones, slowly, persistently, changing the landscape forever. Life with Michael deepened in all the ways you hope for. We bought a place together, a sun-filled loft with enough space for both of us to create. The biggest decision we ever made wasn't about a down payment, though. It was about becoming parents ourselves. The moment that little pink line appeared, a lifetime of fears rushed to the surface. Not the usual ones. Would I be a good mom? But a much more specific terror. Would I become my parents? Would I, without even realizing it, start measuring my child's worth by their achievements? Would I pass on the legacy of conditional love? I brought this fear to Dr. Richardson, my therapist. I expected a long, complex strategy. Instead, she smiled gently and said, "The fact that you're so terrified of repeating the pattern is the clearest proof that you won't. The cycle breaks with awareness, Esperanza. It breaks with you." The pregnancy became a new kind of journey, one of intentional preparation. Michael and I spent hours talking about the values we wanted in our home. Not excellence above all, but curiosity over correctness. Not achievement, but effort. We made a promise to each other. This child would never have to earn our delight. Telling my parents was its own milestone. My mother cried, but this time they were tears of joy. There was no criticism, no questioning of our readiness. It was just happiness. It was the first time it felt like we were on the same side of a fundamental life event. When my daughter, Sophia, was born, the world shifted on its axis. The love was so immediate, so fierce and unconditional, it felt like a force of nature. I looked at her tiny, perfect face and finally understood what my therapist had meant all those years ago. The love a parent has for a child should be a given, a birthright. My parents flew to New York to meet her. Watching my father, a man of stoic pride, cradle his granddaughter with a tenderness I'd never seen in him. It was healing in a way I couldn't have engineered. He wasn't looking at her for what she would become. He was simply in awe of what she was. "She has your eyes, Esperanza," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. My relationship with my mother transformed in the quiet, domestic moments. While I nursed Sophia, she would tell me stories about her own pregnancy with me. Stories I'd never heard, free from the weight of later expectations. She talked about the heat of the Arizona summer, the mangoes she craved, how my father painted my nursery himself. For the first time, I was connecting with the woman she was before she became the critic. I was meeting my mother. They visit now a few times a year. The dynamics are forever changed. They are grandparents, not supervisors. They offer suggestions sometimes, but they're just that, suggestions. They've learned to hold their tongues, and I've learned to receive their love without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Professionally, I stepped back from the relentless pace. I started my own small consultancy, choosing projects that aligned with my life, not just my resume. The drive to prove myself to some invisible panel of judges had vanished. Now my work is an expression of who I am, not a plea for validation. Last month, we celebrated Sophia's first birthday. My parents were there, along with Gabriel, Maria, and their kids. My chosen family, Jennifer, Zoe, Michael's siblings, filled the room. The noise was beautiful, a happy chaos. At one point, I looked across the room and saw my father holding Sophia, showing her a bright, colorful painting on our wall, one of my own early pieces. He was pointing, talking to her in a soft, animated voice. My mother stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his back, watching them with a soft smile. There was no past in that moment, no resentment, no scorekeeping. There was just a grandfather, a grandmother, and their granddaughter. There was just love, not the kind you earn, the kind you simply have. The little girl who sat at that kitchen table, desperately trying to be perfect, was finally free. And the woman she became was building a home where her own daughter would never have to fight that battle. The story doesn't end. It just finds new, more peaceful chapters. Your piece is out there, too. Keep building towards it. Thank you for walking this path with me. That first birthday party felt like a true beginning, like we had all finally turned a page and started a new book together. But life, as it turns out, isn't a series of neat endings and beginnings. It's a continuous tapestry, where old threads get woven into new patterns. The years with Sophia were a masterclass in a love I had only theorized about. I watched her, a tiny, fierce individual, and my biggest goal became protecting her spirit. One day, she was about 4, she spent an hour meticulously drawing a portrait of our cat. It was a glorious mess of purple scribbles with too many eyes. She ran up to me, beaming, her whole body radiating pride. "Look, Mama, it's Mittens, it's perfect." And my heart didn't clench with a need to correct her or push her to do better. It soared. "It is perfect," I said, and I meant it. "I love how you used purple. Tell me all about it." In that simple exchange, a generational chain was broken. The cycle wasn't just interrupted, it was replaced with something new. My father, Carlos, surprised us all. Retirement softened edges I thought were carved in stone. He started calling on Sundays just to talk to his favorite girls. His conversations with Sophia were a revelation. He'd tell her long, silly stories about the animals he saw in the desert as a boy. There was no agenda, no test at the end, just a grandfather delighting in his granddaughter. On one of their visits, he found me in my studio, working on a series of illustrations for a children's book about emotions. He stood quietly for a moment, watching my hand move across the tablet. You make the feelings look like colors," he said, his voice quiet with something that sounded like awe. "I try to, Papa," I replied. He nodded slowly. "It's a good thing for children to see that it's important work." It wasn't an apology for the past. It was something better, a genuine appreciation for my present. He was finally seeing the world through my eyes, and he liked what he saw. Then, about a year ago, my mother, Lucia, had a fall. It was a bad one, breaking her hip. The call from my father was frantic, laced with a fear I'd never heard in him. I booked the first flight to Arizona. The roles were reversed now. I was the one organizing care, talking to doctors, managing the household. My father, always the rock, was adrift. One evening, sitting by my mother's bedside in the hospital, he broke down. He cried for the years he'd wasted, for the harsh words that could never be taken back. I was so afraid. He confessed, his voice raw. Afraid that in this country, being good wouldn't be enough. You had to be the best. I thought I was protecting you. I was just breaking you. I held his hand, this proud, stubborn man now folded in grief. "I know, Papa," I whispered. "I know you were afraid. It wasn't about granting forgiveness in that moment. It was about bearing witness to his truth. The weight of his regret was his to carry, but I no longer had to be crushed by it." My recovery became our family's new project. Gabrielle and I coordinated schedules. I used my design skills to make her recovery space at home more cheerful and functional. Sophia drew her endless pictures to make Grandma's leg feel better. In the quiet moments of her convalescence, my mother and I talked, really talked. She told me about the immense pressure she felt to justify my father's sacrifices, to prove to their families back in Mexico that they had made it. My rebellion wasn't just a rejection of their plans, it felt like a public failure of their entire American dream. "I am so sorry, Mija," she said one afternoon, her hand gripping mine. "I was so busy building a perfect life, I forgot to live the one we had." Hearing that after all these years was like a final, deep breath after being underwater for a lifetime. The air was clear. Today, our family is a mosaic, beautiful, but full of cracks and seams where the pieces joined. It's not perfect. There are still awkward silences, old habits that die hard, but the foundation of judgment has been replaced by one of mutual respect. Sophia is 6 now. She knows her grandparents adore her exactly as she is. She has no concept of the war that was fought for the peace she enjoys, and that is the greatest victory I could ever have. My story began with a dinner that shattered a family. It's ending with a different kind of table, one where we all have a seat, not because we're perfect, but because we're family. The journey wasn't about changing them. It was about changing me. It was about building a life so whole that I could finally offer them a place in it without losing myself. Your journey is your own, but wherever you are in it, whether you're still at that painful dinner table or you're just starting to build your own, know that peace is possible. It starts with a single quiet decision to choose yourself. Thank you for being part of my story, that peace we built. It wasn't a final destination. It was more like learning to sail on a calm sea after surviving a lifetime of storms. You enjoy the stillness, but you know the weather can change, and it did. Sophia grew into a bright, willful 10-year-old, all sharp observations and a fierce sense of justice. She's the one who, without knowing our history, would ask the questions that cut to the heart of things. "Why does Grandpa get quiet when you talk about your work, Mama?" Or "Grandma always says I'm so smart, like it's a surprise." It was watching her navigate her own world that brought a new challenge. She came home from school one day, devastated. She hadn't made the lead in the school play. She was in the chorus, and to her it felt like a monumental failure. "I'm just not good enough." She sobbed into my shoulder, and I felt it, a ghost from my past, a phantom urge to say, "Well, next time you'll have to practice more. You'll have to be better." I felt the old script rising in my throat, but I swallowed it. I held her and I said, "Oh, my love, I am so sorry you're hurting, but I am so excited to see you shine in that chorus. Your voice is a gift, no matter where you're standing." In that moment, I wasn't just comforting my daughter. I was comforting the little girl I used to be. The healing wasn't just for me. It was a shield for her. My father, Carlos, continued to surprise us. His 80th birthday was approaching, and Gabriel and I planned a small gathering. A week before, he asked to see my studio. He'd never asked before. He moved slowly through the space, his hands behind his back, looking at my prints, my sketches, my awards tucked modestly on a shelf. He stopped in front of a large, abstract painting I'd done. A swirl of deep blues and fiery reds titled the argument. He was quiet for a long time, then he said, "This one. It feels loud." "It is," I said softly. He nodded, his eyes still fixed on the canvas. "I hear it," he whispered, and in those 3 words I felt a lifetime of unspoken apologies finally land. He wasn't just seeing my work, he was finally hearing my pain. It was one of the most profound moments of connection we ever had, but life, in its balance, gives and takes. My mother's health began a slow, steady decline. The strong, formidable woman who once ruled our dinner table with a critical eye became frail, her memory beginning to fray at the edges. The past for her was becoming a tangled knot. During one of our visits, she was having a good day. We were looking through an old photo album, and we came across a picture of me at my high school graduation, my face a mask of stoic achievement. She traced the picture with a trembling finger. "You were always such a serious girl," she said, her voice distant, "so difficult to please. We never knew what would make you happy." The old wound, the one I thought had fully scarred over, throbbed. The narrative in her mind had rewritten itself to protect her. I felt a flash of the old anger, hot and sharp. I could have corrected her. I could have laid out the entire history, the science fair, the art program, the anniversary dinner. But I looked at her, this small, confused woman who was my mother, and I saw that the battle was over, the war was won. Arguing with a ghost of her own making would help no one. I placed my hand over hers. "We all just wanted to be happy, Mama," I said gently. "We just had different maps." She looked at me, her eyes cloudy, and then she smiled, a genuine, uncomplicated smile. "Yes," she said, "different maps." It was a surrender not to her, but to the futility of changing the past. I was finally free from needing her to remember my truth. My truth was enough. My life now is a tapestry woven with all these threads, the sharp, painful ones from the past, and the softer, stronger ones I've chosen. Michael and I celebrate 15 years together. My consultancy thrives. My chosen family is my anchor. The relationship with my parents is what it is. A quiet, tender truce built on the land I claimed for myself. It's not the relationship I dreamed of as a child, but it's real, it's honest, and it's enough. If you're watching this, and your story feels too heavy to carry, know this. The goal isn't to change the people who hurt you. The goal is to build a life so beautiful and so true to yourself that their opinions, their versions of history, their conditional love, simply lose their power over you. You build your own table, you choose your own family. You write your own ending, and it is never, ever too late to start. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. It has been the honor of my life to share it with you. So, this is where my story rests. It didn't end with a dramatic reconciliation or a perfect storybook resolution. It ended with something quieter and in many ways more lasting: acceptance. I accepted that my parents loved me with the capacity they had, which was shaped by their own fears and struggles. I accepted that the little girl at the kitchen table didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be seen. And most importantly, I accepted that it was my job, as the adult she became, to finally see her. The journey wasn't about winning their approval. It was about outgrowing the need for it. The most powerful inheritance I am passing to my daughter is not a legacy of academic excellence or a specific career path. It's the simple, unshakable knowledge that she is loved for who she is, not for what she achieves. The cycle of conditional love ends here with me. If you take anything from my story, let it be this permission. You are allowed to mourn the family you wish you had while building the life you deserve. You are allowed to set boundaries, even with the people who share your blood. Your worth is not a negotiation, it is a fact. Your voice, your dreams, your authentic self. They are not negotiable, they are your birthright. Protect them, nurture them, and never, ever apologize for building a table where you finally have a seat. Thank you for listening. Your own story of healing is waiting to be written. Go write it.